This is Earth's Creation by Australian artist Emily Unware. So, like I had mentioned, she is from Australia, and what I just find so fascinating about her is that she starts her painting career in her 80s. So now that doesn't mean she wasn't doing art before then, she was, but her paintings, like we are studying now, weren't started until she was in her 80s. And then I think she painted for about 8 years and did about 3,000 art pieces. It's like one a day. It's insanely prolific in that time. It just shows you it's never too late, right, to start something spectacular and new. So she, again, from Australia, and she's known as an Aboriginal Australian, and she is descendant basically from the indigenous people of the Australian mainland and many of its islands. So if you're, again, an indigenous person of Australia, right, Aborigine. So she was born in 1910. When she's very young, Australia was settled by Europeans, and those Europeans were running most of the cattle farms and that on the mainland, and that's where she worked. And that's what it means by pastoral property. So she's working, but working for others, not working for herself or her family, and very much a part of nature. Nature is always, a deep component to her life. So it wasn't until 1976, so that's 50 plus years later, that the native Australians, the Aborigines, were granted land rights. And so she and others lived independently. And in that time when they are living in I think they're living in a place called Utopia, she, being kind of the elder statesman female of the group, she was with other women creating ceremonial sand paintings for different ceremonies and rituals for the Aborigines. And she would do decorative motifs. She would paint them on women's bodies for ceremonies. So they're very much like abstract patterns and whatnot. And then the other thing that she had done was founded what was called the Utopia. Again, that's where she's from. Women's Batik Group. And Batik, I think, originates from Indonesia, and it's fabric that is very pattern based, and you can see like dots and lines and different patterns that are created, and then there's wax to kind of keep the patterns in place, and the fabric kind of not stable but intact. And so she's the founder of this Batik group, and during the time period when she's creating that kind of art, there's a gallery in Sydney that was interested in sponsoring an Aboriginal art project. So they brought paints to Utopia, and Emily had them, other people, and that's when she starts to paint these abstract paintings. And the one on the bottom is her first painting. And I think it's the most expensive art piece sold by a Australian artist. And so the one we are studying, though, is above. And I like you to see the contrast. You can see the change in her art as she progresses with it. Now, two vocab terms that I'd like you to know with Emily and Australian art. One is green time, which is, anytime it rains, everything gets kind of clean. The air feels cleaner, the colors seem richer, and that's really what that is referring to. So the painting, Earth's Creation, is a reference to, I think, the time known as green time, just after the rains. And then there's another term that you associate with the Aboriginal people called dreamings. And it represents the time when ancestors, so their spirits, created life, created important geographic formations and sites. So those two terms, I think, you can apply to this. And in fact, a lot of her art might be referenced as showing her dreamings, her notion of and her referencing to ancestral spirits creating important parts of the landscape. And so she's depicting that in her abstract art. So I think this piece, Earth Creation, does both. It shows this lush green time of the landscape and perhaps a reference to the ancestral spirits who have created everything within the landscape. So again, the painting is huge. It's 20 feet wide, 9 feet tall. It just, if you stood in front of that, it would immerse you in the colors and the brush strokes and the texture, and it's mesmerizing. It's almost hallucinogenic in many ways. Some people connect her a lot to Monet, Claude Monet from Impressionism, and we did not study it, but he has done really extended, long and tall canvases of like ponds with water lilies, and those become incredibly hallucinogenic as well and have that loose brushstroke, which is similar here to Emily's work. And so we're also going to connect it to abstract expressionism for a number of reasons. One, it is abstract. You look at that, and without the title Earth's Creation, you might not reference it to anything in particular that is figural. Second, it feels like the emotion and the feelings behind her are guiding her to create. And like Jackson Pollock, who again we did not study, or William de Kooning, who we did, like these action painters and get their bodies involved, she would too. And so her canvases are so large, she has to sit within them, be immersed with them around her, and as she creates. So it's not just like a canvas on an easel and you stand kind of distanced a little bit, and the only thing that really touches it is your brush. You are immersed, you're sitting within it, it is a part of you, you are a part of it. The color scheme for this expands away from her typical color scheme, which she had done in the past, which is depicted by what's on the bottom in that painting. I think the painting down below is more regimented, a little bit more pattern-based, a little bit more thought through. It feels more organized in a strange way compared to the looseness of this. The feeling is, I think, different, and the color palette helps to create that too. So since you're going into like green time, you've got more tropical colors, greens, bright colors, blues of water and land and sky. It's just this explosion of natural phenomenon around her. So that is another picture here that I just love for her, because you can see the painting, you see her within it, and you see her and the painting immersed in the land that she's representing. I mean, she doesn't really leave this place. She stays in Utopia. She knows it well. It is a part of who she is. There's a deep connection to ancestry and the ancestors who created this land that she's in. She is one with the landscape and one with her painting. So that is, I think, a beautiful and magical connection that she has. That's why I wanted to show you this picture, because she's in the landscape that she's painting that. So I'm thinking for function and formal qualities. Function, it's definitely a landscape. And again, it's not necessarily a purely abstract piece, because it is, the title of it connects it to landscape. So it's not a pure abstraction, but it definitely is a pure landscape because there are no people involved or included. And then for formal qualities, you could do texture. You've got dots, you've got little kind of brush strokes around. It gives you that sense of movement across the canvas, of growth, of light shining and reflecting off of the natural elements and phenomenon in the art piece. I think that works. You you're just surrounded. I don't even know, it's like that horror vacui term you could use here too. It's that fear of empty spaces. You're just surrounded by nature. And this is how she's grown up. So Emily Unware, again, an Aboriginal artist from Australia, celebrating, honoring, and showing the importance of land to the people of Utopia.